Terry, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Brad. Look forward to it.
So take us back to what happened in 1984 when you were 20 years old. What was your diagnosis and how did you respond?
Yeah, so I was at the stage of life where I was really living life on easy street. Everything was going great, hitting all the milestones. I was president of my fraternity at the time, and then boom, I got a diagnosis of a really, really rare form of cancer called a fibrosarcoma, and it was in my right maxillary area, which is sort of behind your nose. That's where it was discovered. So really rare. I was blessed and fortunate that I got referred to the surgeon that I did, who I am in touch with to this day. I am blessed and grateful that I was sent to UC San Francisco, where they treated me, because these are scary types of tumors. Sarcomas are incredibly rare. They're not well researched. They definitely weren't back then, and the outcomes are not very good. So I was lucky. The journey went on and on, though. So, it went on for many years.
It must have come as a complete shock. You're 20 years old. You're embarking on the journey of life, and then suddenly you have this obstacle in your path. So tell us more. How did you cope with that and overcome it?
Yeah, I think that you're at that age, you feel like you're invincible, right? It's
Yeah.
it's sort of like, oh, I'm going to get through this. It's no big deal. So on the one hand, it was shocking, but I've been somebody that's had a great foundation of faith in my life, which I still rely on to this day. And I think that really gave me a lot of the strength to step back and say, hey, if this is a cancer, um, that I've got a lot to deal with here. I'm going to need help. I need prayer. I need guidance. I need support. I need all those things. So I was cognizant enough of that, but I don't think I thought about it very much. I sort of thought, oh, the doctor tells me he's going to take care of me. I'm going to be back on the road. I'm going to be living that life that I was before. And I did, Brad, for 6 months after that procedure. I went back to my normal life. It was like, okay, treatment is surgery and you're done. We caught this early. But like many sarcomas, it's got tentacles and it came back.
Mm.
And in 6 months, yeah, it was a whole different story. And that's really where my story and my life journey began, because that's really when it became life changing. The initial diagnosis, the initial treatment wasn't life changing. It was sort of just a shock, but it was, okay, I escaped that one. I can keep on going. But the recurrence was a fully different story that just caught me way off guard.
And you ended up having over 30 surgeries?
Yeah, so I ended up having several more cancer procedures. It was one of these things where they just couldn't get to the margins. They couldn't get clean margins. And that's always a horrific thing to experience, right? As a doctor calling you up and saying, hey, you know what, Terry, we got to go in again. Hey, Terry, guess what? We got to go in again. It's going to be minor this time. And so you start to go, oh my God, are they ever going to catch this? But ultimately they did. I had a bunch of radiation therapy. And then, yeah, it was probably 25 more reconstructive procedures to attempt, Brad, to get me back to who I was before. And that's really the journey that I went on, right? Is it that I learned, though I was only in my 20s, I learned that I wasn't going to become that old Terry again. I was going to have to transform myself into somebody new. And how was I going to do that? Was I prepared for that? No. How was I going to stumble through it? And so I had to kind of find my way. But again, I relied on faith. I relied on an incredible support system. I relied on a bunch of tools that sort of came to me. So I was really blessed that I had this adaptability, this built-in kind of resilience, that I could think outside the box a little bit and think about what's going to work for me. What things can I try to cope and to keep hope through this process? Because you know what it's like at that age. I mean, your appearance means a ton. It's sort of how you identify yourself in many ways, right? And
Mm.
struggling with how I looked changed how I socialized. It sort of changed the whole picture in so many ways. And I just had to figure out ultimately how what I learned through the process was that it really wasn't the scars on the outside that were my issue. It was the scars that I had built on the inside that became far more difficult to deal with
Mm.
because, but that took, interactions with people to highlight that fact and brutal honesty from other people for me to wake up and say, "Holy cow, this is more than my face. This is an insecurity and a lack of confidence that has come creeping into my world and is changing me overnight."
Mm. What are some of the tools and methods that came to you over this period to help you navigate?
Yeah.
And
So I kind of came up with my own survival kit. It consisted of really 7 key things. And I can go through them real quick. I mean, first and foremost, is my
please.
religious faith gave me tremendous courage and strength, but importantly, it gave me hope. It was surrounding myself with a positive team of people that I trusted. It was, interestingly, it was about being goal oriented and getting really focused because what I realized was I needed to set goals for myself because I had sort of lost faith in myself in many ways. And as I started to learn that if I could achieve a goal, a personal one, a professional one, that would help me to start to believe in myself again. And that began the process of starting to rebuild some of the confidence I'd lost. Probably my superpower that I fell into, Brad, was practicing gratitude, which leads to a positive mindset, right?
Mm.
Um, and then the other three are, I would say, just finding life balance, finding the importance of developing outlets in life to cope with stress, to deal with the daily anxieties. Support groups were instrumental in my healing. And then lastly, and really importantly too, was positive imaging, visualization, kind of visualizing myself in a better place. And using that in two different ways, kind of on a short term to deal with anxieties, but also on a long term basis to kind of say, here's how I can envision where I'm going to be in 2 years. And practicing that every day, really easy exercise I found to do. Still do it
Mm.
every day today. So those are some of the things that I developed for myself. And over time, I sort of learned that as I spoke to different audiences, they would say, "Hey, these are great, but you talk about all this stuff, but it's not in your memoir. You need to share this framework with other people." So I kind of packaged up something in a more prescriptive manner to help other people deal with, adversity, change, conflict, whatever challenges they're dealing with themselves.
Mm. Amazing. And those tools that you identified and that you used, they turn out to be some of the most robust evidence-based approaches. And I love the fact that you identified them and practiced them and brought them to life in your own way. For someone who's sitting there thinking, what is, how do I visualize? Because I've had a few people ask me, I really want to visualize, but halfway through the visualization, I start getting distracted. Any tips for that
Yeah.
process?
Well, first of all, and I wish I had the title handy, but there's a lot of books about it. I did pick up a book and read about, how does this actually work? How can I implement it in an easy way? Because I agree 100%. Meditation is something that's difficult for me
Mm,
to do on a daily basis, right? More than 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm sort of, monkey brain.
same.
But I would practice it in ways that didn't take long. It would basically be I'd lie down on my bed or I'd lie down on the floor if I was at work, and I'd literally spend a few minutes visualizing myself in some other place and just imagining the scenario. And it was always something I w- that I strive for, anyways, a place that I wanted to be. I used to backpack a lot, so I did a lot of visualization around backpacking and nature and beauty, and those things always um, bring a good feeling to me anyway, right? So, yeah, but it was really just practicing simple little steps that take less than 5 minutes. And And I would say that to each his own. But what I read about was I learned about all these people, highly successful people, incredible professional athletes who practice visualization. And I
Mm.
learned that there's really simple things that they do every day. And what I learned was the power of visualization is as important to many athletes as practice on the field or practice on the ski slope, whatever it is that your deal is. But getting your mind in the game is so important, and it's kind of fun to experiment. So,
In my own life, when I've made the time and effort to visualize, those things tend to happen, which is really interesting. So, if you can come up with a vivid enough view of what that future state looks like, you are more likely to notice the patterns that will get you there.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I
Tell
mean,
us
one
about
thing
your,
I did real
please.
quick, just to give
Yeah.
you some context. One thing I used to do is during the process of, the doctor calls that I mentioned earlier, like, "Hey, Terry, we got a little bit more that we gotta cut out of you there, we're gonna have to schedule for another procedure." I worried about that stuff all the time. It went on, and so I would visualize. I would imagine myself backpacking. I'd imagine myself hiking up in the Trinity Alps up in Northern California. I'd imagine myself, hiking through the aspen tree groves. I'd picture this whole scenario, and then I'd see a waterfall, and I just imagine walking toward that waterfall,
Hmm.
underneath that waterfall, and what I would visualize, Brad, was just like this cold, clean, refreshing mountain water careening over my head, flushing through my head and body, any negativity, any malignancies, anything out through my system, down through my toes and down the stream beyond. It was just kind of this cleansing feeling. It always calmed me down and soothed me at the same time and kind of just
Mm.
put me in a different mindset. Didn't take
Mm.
long.
Nature is an important aspect of your life.
It is very much so.
Mm. Mm. Tell us about your favorite places.
Well, we touched on that in the beginning, but I just went to New Zealand and Australia for the first time in my life last year. Found those places incredibly beautiful. I was a little stunned how many logs I saw at ports, how many
Yeah.
trees are being cut down. But it's still, there's just such a plethora of forest and everything like that. Um, but for me, I'm blessed. I live in California, and
Hmm.
it's a pretty state, but there's other places in the world that are incredibly beautiful, like Africa is probably my favorite place in the world, and pick the country, they're all beautiful.
They do, yeah, yeah. And getting out into green spaces. I mean, it's something that doctors are prescribing. Not that we, as humans,
Absolutely.
we shouldn't really need a prescription to just go into a green space. But if it's necessary, then fair enough. Now, you've written a fantastic book called The Resilience Mindset. Can you tell us a little bit about that and your ReBAR resilience framework?
Yeah, so the resilience mindset's really about how adversity can strengthen us as individuals, as teams, as leaders, by helping us to learn how to build resilience, to gain confidence and find greater purpose. Um, and in the book, I share this ReBAR resilience framework, which is my acronym, that I think works really well because rebar is a reinforcing bar that holds concrete in tension. And that's really what my framework's designed to do. So rebar is represented by four key phases
Hmm.
that someone would go through on their journey through an adversity or a change in their life. And so it's reflect, it's build, it's act, and it's renew. And if you'd like, I could touch on each one of those really briefly.
Please.
Okay.
Yeah, love to.
So reflect is really about taking the time, starting your day, ending your day with gratitude, thinking about all the things you're grateful for, because there's always a million things. Despite whatever's going on in our lives, if you can step back and think about what you're grateful for, you will find there's always a lot, right? That puts you in a positive mindset. So that's how you
Mm.
start your day. That's how you end your day. But my reflection technique is really about stepping back and doing an audit of your day, thinking about what transpired? What did I learn today? Was I inspired by anything? If I was inspired by something, is there something I can apply to my life tomorrow, whether that's in my professional life or my personal life? As you move into build is really about developing that positive mindset. It's about developing a growth mindset. And it's when we start to identify our support systems. It's when we figure out how we're going to find life balance. It's when we um, start to practice faith if that's important to us. But the most important thing in the build phase is about choosing positive, which is our attitude. We have a choice. We choose the attitude that we have. And when
Mm.
you choose positive, it's much easier to navigate roadblocks, right, than when you're doing it with uncertainty or doubt. Um, Act is really where the rubber meets the road. So that's when we start to face challenges. It's when we take control. It's when we get focused and set goals, kind of like what I was talking about earlier. So I think of that as execution mode. That's where you start to make a lot of progress. And then the final phase is renew. And renew is, again, when you step back and you think about what you learned from whatever that ordeal was. And you start by recognizing that if you've reached this point, you've survived it. So celebrate that and think about the skills and characteristics that you embody that enabled you to overcome whatever that was. And um, that helps build confidence. But it's really this commitment to a process. It's when you reassess and try to learn. And that's really what a growth mindset is, right? Like, what did we learn from this ordeal, and how can we apply that to make a better version of ourselves
Mm.
going forward? So, um, and the way the book's designed, the last point on this is that I talk about the methods within each phase, but the important part is the questions that are sprinkled throughout, which is to help the reader personalize to their own journey so that they can take away something actionable at the end of each chapter for their own purpose and for whatever it is that they're dealing with. So
Nice. Great framework. And that reflection piece, I think, is so important. And it's missing from so many lives because people in any
agree.
quiet space just pick up a device and scroll and consume, consume, consume. I was listening to a podcast between Chris Williamson and Professor Andrew Huberman, and there's another dimension of benefits to reflection and what you called the daily audit. And that is what he calls anti forgetting. And by simply recalling what happened over the course of a day, you actually increase the potential for learning, memory consolidation. It has
Hmm,
multiple benefits. And I think it also makes you more intentional about what you're going to do the next day because you know that you're
that's
going to
right.
reflect on it. Mm.
That's right. Yeah, and I
Do
think,
you,
in business, that's a really
yeah.
important thing too, right? Because
Yes.
I think when first of all, when you start with a positive mindset, it it puts you in a different place, right? You're more likely to take a risk. You're more likely to say, you know what, I'm going to propose this idea. It might not
Mm.
be fully baked, but I'm going to propose it. I've reflected on it enough. I think there's some solid foundation to it. I'm going to propose it. I'm going to put it out there. Maybe that's just to yourself. Maybe it's to a team. Maybe it's to your boss, whatever. But I call it marinating ideas. I do it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have a specific process for that that you suggest for people? Is it a gratitude journal or some kind of writing exercise?
I think it's whatever works for you.
Mm.
I think gratitude journals are great. I think writing things down is fantastic if you can do it. But I find you brought this up earlier. People were consumed with so much coming at us, right? So if that's hard for you to be in a place where you're surrounded by technology or you're surrounded by things when you're writing your gratitude journal, I say go out and take a walk your dog. It's okay to listen to your podcast, Brad, while you're walking, right? But
Oh,
maybe
thank
take
you.
take the headset off for 5 to 7 minutes of that walk and
Yeah.
reflect.
Mm.
And just, when we talked about being outside, nature, that's always kind of a healing thing anyway. But open yourself up and wherever you can find the time to do it, because a lot of people say, God, it's really hard for me to find 5 minutes.
Mm.
And it's really not if you get in the practice of it. It's a habit just like anything else, right? I mean,
Mhm.
if you work out or exercise every day, you've developed a habit, you do it. And you tell yourself, God, if I didn't have that 45 minutes or an hour to work out, I'd be crazy,
Mm,
because it's a habit now. So you can find 5 to 7 minutes to create a habit, and
yeah.
reflect, I think.
Oh, I totally agree. And in terms of the build phase, so building that ability to shift from fixed to growth mindset, any tools or suggestions? Because people, especially under pressure, they'll revert to their old habits and their old mindset and their old way of dealing with things. So, any tips?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I would say that it's really important about who you're surrounding yourself with. Um, I had to make tough decisions about that, right? I had people that were negative influences that I just needed to shut out,
Mm,
and I think that when you have, and I'm not saying it's all about getting reinforcement, but it's about being around positive energy and possibility that
mm,
moves you in the right direction toward that mindset. Um, and having some other things in place along with that, focusing your life on a more healthy lifestyle is important too. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's so important, kind of who we surround ourselves with. I put a lot of stock in that.
mm,
I would never underestimate it. But I also think, like in the workplace, right? What that means is you owe it to yourself if you're going to be successful in the workplace to find mentors. Ask
yeah.
your mentors for things. Ask people for things. It's amazing. Like some woman came to me recently and asked me if I would write a forward for her book. And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." Because I had already read portions of it. And I said, "Let me read the book first to give you an A-okay or no. But based on what I've read, yeah." And she's just like, "This has been really tough for me just to ask someone for something. But when I ask somebody, 9 times out of 10, people wanna help you.
Mm,
People
mhm,
like to mentor people. So ask for that assistance. Find groups, internal allies in the workplace, peer groups,
yeah,
networking groups, all that stuff.
so true. It can be really hard just to take that step and reach out to someone. You feel awkward, you
Yes.
feel imposter syndrome or whatever else is going on.
Yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
reaching out to people who I had been guests on my podcast when my book came out last year, just for some testimonials or endorsements. Oh, and I thought these people are going to just be rolling their eyes, like, "What is this guy?" And it was such a positive response. It was
Yeah,
amazing. So you forget that people do like to mentor you and be there. But I think on the flip side, as you said, like being of service to others as well, because
yeah,
then you're giving and receiving at the same time. And
yep,
I think there's something to that.
100%.
Mm.
You said it better
So
than I did.
how has the book been received?
So far so good. Doing a lot of different events and trying to reach audiences in different ways. Some of it's just on the personal development side, and then on the other side, it's professional development. So
Hmm.
I'm having fun with it. It's you've written a book, so it's kind of pushed me a little bit out of my comfort zone, I would say, which is great. It's I've had all these opportunities to write articles, right, for publications. And as you know, Brad, when you get asked to write an article, they want it to be unique. This is an article for their publication. It can't be something you've written somewhere else and you're sort of rejiggering around.
Yeah.
So it sort of forces you to step outside of your own little box and say, okay, how can I apply my framework or whatever to this type of an audience? So it's been fun.
Very nice. And in the work context, I know you've been running workshops with clients. You know, would you say that the development of resilience is similar for leaders, teams? Can you apply the same principles to a group, to a company?
I think absolutely you can. There's practices, right? That sometimes I think companies are good at doing, other times not so much. I mean, this postmortem, of whether it's a campaign or it's an acquisition that we went through or something, but really digging deep and getting the whole, different parts of the team involved to get that feedback. How do we learn from this? How can we grow from this? How can we improve going forward? And what do we learn along the way? And what do we learn about ourselves, and I think leaders, personally, I think leaders that are highly successful and highly resilient have a lot of emotional intelligence.
Mm,
They're people that have empathy. Not all leaders want to admit that or say, "Oh, I'm that kind of person," or not, because maybe they think it makes them weak. I don't think
mhm,
so. I think
mm,
empathy is a great thing, and it builds trust on teams. And I think people, when things do get tough and you need resilience, people want to work for a leader that trusts his team, trusts her team, is empathetic to your needs, is flexible, gives you what you need to be successful. So
mhm. Yeah.
I don't
Emotional
know what you think.
intelligence
Yeah.
is so well, it's critical. I sometimes run this exercise, especially for groups of engineers or logical, analytical types. And I say, come up to the front on this whiteboard, and I draw two columns. One says good boss, one says bad boss. And I say, write down anything that comes to your mind that you recall about a really good manager or leader that you had over time. And then write down the things that you disliked about a bad leader that you had. And it's so funny. After 10 minutes or so, you look at it and there's a whole lot of stuff written in both columns from all of the participants. Never is it a technical skill. Never is it they were
No.
exceptional at being an architect. Never is it they were a fantastic computer programmer or
Yeah.
whatever. It's all the soft skills. It's all how
Yeah.
did they inspire me? Did they support me? Did they care for me? Did they?
Yeah.
That's it.
And
That's
I think
leadership.
I totally agree with that 100%. It doesn't surprise me, but I think that's a challenge young leaders have, is that
Yeah.
they feel this need to show their value, like I'm a whiz kid, or I need to demonstrate to my team how smart I am so that they always
Yes.
think of me as, up here. And it's like, no, it's not that way at all. You got to empower your team and
Hmm.
give them what they need. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I see that too. I see new managers, and there's a real difference between managers and leaders, but new
True.
managers, especially, trying to demonstrate that they're better than the team because that's going to
Yeah.
get them the respect. And
Yeah.
that's the worst thing you can do because then the team goes, well, you're in it for yourself, and trust
Right.
drops. So
That's
we're all
right.
just protecting ourselves from you because um, you're the brilliant whiz kid, as you said, and that actually affects overall resilience in the team because then they're
It
more
does,
likely.
and yeah,
Yeah.
100%, and I think, if you work for a company that is in the practice of doing 360 reviews, you
Mm,
should know that, right? Like, "Hey, it matters because my people are gonna be reviewing me just as I'm gonna be reviewing them, so
yeah.
what defines a good leader or a good manager?" Like, think of it from that context and that perspective, and it might change how you operate.
Yeah. And do you think that an organization should follow the ReBAR principles? For example, regular reflection. How does an organization bring that to life? It's something I've struggled with because they go, I mean, the other one is organizational values, and they put it up on the wall, and then no one knows what it means or how to bring it to
Yeah,
life. It's like, how
yeah.
do we actually practice as a collective? And is it a case of actually allocating time? Okay, at this time on a Wednesday, we reflect on what's happened over the past week, and we include gratitude for what went well.
That's right. And I think that's so important, right? Is that you start that meeting or that discussion with, let's talk about a win from last week. Let's not just hammer into all the things that are going wrong.
Mm,
Because when you start with, okay, what's a win and people feel good about something, it sort of opens them up to have a different type of dialogue, I think, more than just, oh God, we're going into this post-mortem and it was an ugly campaign or it
mhm.
was a bad product rollout or whatever. Changes the whole it changes the whole flow.
Mm. Do you think that the spirituality aspect or having a religious belief or faith system makes a big difference? Because I see The research suggests, yes, it does make a big difference. People are more resilient if they believe that there is something beyond themselves that is supporting them on the path. And if people don't have a specific tradition or they've lost touch with it, any thoughts of what they could do? Nature is one way. You go out in nature
Yep.
and get a sense of awe and connection.
Yep.
But any thoughts?
Yeah. So I do think it's incredibly powerful to believe that there's something bigger than myself, as you say. That really is about giving yourself some hope that, hey, there's forces out there, there's energy out there, um, there's there's strength that I can get and I can apply to my life. I think a lot about this. You can call it a poem, I guess. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Footprints.
My
I
grandparents had it on the wall.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you think it's hokey, but I keep this thing on my in
Mm,
front of my computer, right? And I think about it every day because it always reminds me that, like, when things are getting tough, it's this whole concept, right? Of where were you when I was struggling the most? There's only, one set of footprints in the sand,
mm,
and that's when he was carrying this person,
yeah.
and so it's I think it's a really powerful piece that I give to people in book events who are really struggling with finding faith and believing that there's something else out there, and they have somewhat of they're giving up. So I think it can give you a lot of hope. So
Mm,
however it works for you, some people are dogmatic about, oh, it's the community. You got to go to church every week or whatever. I don't buy into that. It's like whatever works for you, where you feel like you can get strength. Um, that's a tool that you can rely on, and you can build a process around it in your mind, and you can build it into your life and think about it every day, and it's a positive force.
mhm. Any tips for someone in the midst of that challenging journey who might be feeling a little bit down? Because something that shines through from your journey is you managed to stay positive throughout.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does go back to gratitude. It really does, in my opinion, because when you practice gratitude, it gives you
Mm,
life perspective too, right, Brad? I mean, when you think about all the things you're grateful for, suddenly, like, your perspective changes a little bit, and you're like, you know what? Things could be a lot worse. I could be that person living in a war zone, you know,
true.
without the ability to feed my family or feed myself and worry where I'm going to be tomorrow, where I'm going to sleep. There's so many, like, things that are so much worse than what you might be going through yourself. But I think it's really important to again surround yourself with people. It's
Mm,
yeah, the social media thing, communicating with people online is it's just not, it's a tool, and it's a practice that people are gonna employ, but, relying on it is not a positive, I would say. I would say
mm,
push yourself to interact and build relationships, and that puts you in a better place, all the way around.
yeah. Yeah. And then for those who worry about getting out into the real world because they've got some kind of insecurities. I mean, I think we think people care way more than they actually do about how we look. In reality, it's about how you act and how you make
That's
people
right.
feel.
100%. So, it's funny, Brad. I started laughing when you were saying that because it reminds me of myself when I was in my 20s. And I remember going through this period where my friends would say, "Hey, Terry, come meet us at the Triangle in the city, in San Francisco. We're going to hit some bars." And I'd be like, "No, I'm not going to do that." And I would avoid that stuff because I was insecure about the way I looked. Well, when I thought about it, when I reflected on it, Brad, what I realized was what I was insecure about was walking into that bar because I thought everybody was looking at me. But to your point, guess what? Nobody's really looking at you.
Yeah.
People are doing what they're doing. They're consumed with whatever they're involved in. You're not the central point. You are not the central thing that's walking into that room that everybody's going to notice. And if you can try to remember that, that it's not what you think. You're not this monstrous figure that's 20 times bigger than everybody else that everybody's going to notice. You're just another person interacting and living their life. And so you're going to be most likely accepted wherever you go. It's all in your head about what you think isn't going to be accepted, but it is how we carry ourselves. I mean, quick story for you, Brad. I mean, I used to I used to get little kids pointing at me. I'd be on a mass transit situation where I had young kids giggling at me literally sitting across from me, like pointing and giggling, right? I had people staring at me, all this stuff, right? Well, guess what? Fast forward, let's say 10 years. I didn't look any better. I had given up on reconstructive surgery, but guess what? People stopped pointing at me. People stopped staring at me. And all I could think was it was because I had done that work. I had rebuilt myself. I had found a way to gain confidence in who I was as a person, that I was entirely capable of achieving goals and living a life as good as anybody else. Why should I feel less than somebody else? And as I built that confidence, it is amazing that people don't stare at me. Never happens. I mean, I suppose it happens occasionally, but like I never really notice it. Maybe I'm not looking for it either, right?
Yeah, it's such a good point that when you are confident and you know the value in yourself, it shines through and people don't question that. It's kind of like when you are insecure, somehow you're giving off a vibe of, are you looking at me? I'm in that flight state. I'm afraid. I'm anxious. And people tune into that
Yeah.
way, way more than if you just are comfortable in yourself. That's what matters.
Yeah, I think so.
Amazing. If you could leave people with one thing from today's chat, what might it be?
I would say that if you struggle with attitude, practice gratitude. That that's the fastest way to a positive mindset. We've talked about that many times. Sorry to bring it up over and over, but it's so important. And the other thing is, and it relates to reflection, Brad. And and I always say, um, be aware, alert, attentive, and open to the people around you that you're interacting with and to the events that are transpiring around you because they can and they will impact you. And you never know where you're going to get the inspiration that you need to help you get through a crisis in your own life. So open yourself up to other people and have those conversations and you'll be amazed. Don't shy away from interaction.
I love it. Where can people go to find a copy of your book? I can see one in the background just behind you. Where do we go and get one? And by the way, the links will be in the show notes, but I'll let you share where you'd like people to go and how can they connect and follow you?
Yeah, the resilience mindset's available. It's actually available in Australia, New Zealand, as well as anywhere
Ah,
else.
cool.
Amazon.com or any bookstore can order it. It's also on my website at terryhealey.com. And so if you go to terryhealey.com, you'll learn about all of the resources I provide, um, videos, books, testimonials, whatever. So videos. So go there, and all my other social links are there. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn mostly. So I appreciate
Nice.
that.
Thanks so much for sharing that with us. Everyone, do check out the links in the show notes and yeah, get yourself a copy of Resilience Mindset. Thanks, Terry.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well done.